Attractional.
The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine.
Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And you are listening to the best episode of the Church Planter Podcast we've ever had. I'm saying that in anticipation that it's going to be good.
Hey, no pressure. No pressure at all, man. This is, for me, this is like I'll call it a Bama cast, because I'm in Alabama right now. I'm actually sitting here with I got a banjo on my knee as we speak, eating boiled peanuts and some fried possum, a little bit of squirrel leg appetizers, and I did actually eat alligator for lunch today. That's no joke.
Did you?
I did eat alligator. I did.
Nice. Was the alligator dead? That's the question.
By the time I got done with it, and somebody asked me on Facebook, they're like, "Hey, does it taste like chicken?" I'm like, "No, it tastes like crawfish." But then I'm thinking, but nobody knows what crawfish tastes like unless they're...
You're like, no, it tastes like alligator. Come on, stupid.
Yeah, squirrel was unique. That did not taste like chicken, but it wasn't far off because they fried it, and you're eating a little drumstick, and it's a squirrel leg, but it's kind of like a chicken leg.
I feel like we haven't done a podcast in a while. I think it's because we haven't actually done a podcast in a while. You've had some stuff come up with family. We missed a couple of weeks.
I don't. It's funny because I don't know if it's just Bible Inner Circle or if we posted something about it. I know I posted something on Facebook, but I keep getting messages from people giving me condolences. So if you guys have been out there praying for me, my mom passed away, and I will talk about it for a second because it was kind of cool because I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, probably the last time we did our podcast, that I had my quote unquote last conversation with my mom, and she was like, "No, I'm ready," and she was cracking jokes. And so when we were in the hospital, she was like, she let us know, and of course she had made it very plain that when there's no hope, take me off the machines, because she was on a ventilator, and she was still very sharp. The woman was sharp as a tack. She was 100 pounds, but she had pooled fluids because the heart wasn't pumping through the lungs. And so what was happening is she was still mentally sharp as a tack, and they were just blown away. Like they were saying, one nurse said, 14 years, I've never seen somebody with all their faculties. And the surgeon was like, she's probably one of the strongest minds I've ever met. And she was just cool, but she was funny. And she told us, like, hey, take me off. I'm ready to go. And, I want to be asleep. So we knew, like, when we hook her off the ventilator and all that's a tough choice, man. I'm an RN.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's what she wanted, but,
just so you know, if you're ever on a ventilator, I got no problem. I'll pull the plug. So you tell Andrea.
You've always said that. You have always said that. Hey, I got no problem, man. But, it was hard. And, it's my mom. That's the last thing I want to do.
I'm not saying I can do that to my mom. I'm saying I can do that to you. I want to be clear here.
All right. I'll put you in charge then, because that's what it was for my mom. She knew that, it's something I can do. And you never know in that moment whether it's something, it's not active euthanasia. It's passive, where you're not actively killing them, but if they're being kept alive by artificial means, it's ethical to take them off. And so, she was given extra morphine to just make sure that she wasn't in pain and made her comfortable. And then the body took its course. But what was funny is at first they were trying things in stages, and so they weren't going to take her off the ventilator yet. And I had a few moments with her where she couldn't talk, but she could mouth things, and she could, let us know things, and she'd roll her eyes at us because we do crack jokes. Not during that time, but in the days before, and she's a pretty funny lady. But at that moment, I had my time with her, and we prayed, and then I was able to just say goodbye to her, and then so they stopped the drug. The first thing was to stop a drug that was keeping her heart going and beating strong, and they thought if they took her off that, she'd probably last a few hours, and then the heart would get weak. and so she went to sleep. They'd given her some morphine, and she went to sleep. And we thought that could be it. And anyways, a couple hours later, she opens her eyes and looks, and she has this shocked, her eyes get all big. She's like, "What are you guys doing here?" I was like, she thought she was going to wake up in heaven, and she was just like, "Whoa, what are you doing here? Wait, what am I doing here?" And so she was able to say to us, "Hey, I thought this was only supposed to take a couple minutes," and so, but man, it was cool. I remember, reading something that John Wesley said to a guy named John Sinek, one of his circuit riders, and he said, "Our people die well," and he was really proud of that. That they had peace. To John Wesley, the assurance of salvation was precious, and of course, First John talks a lot about, knowing that you know him, and our hearts are at rest in his presence, and on and on and on. He keeps talking about assurance in First John. And my mom had that. And it was really, really cool to watch my mom just walk. She didn't want to die. Nobody likes the idea of dying, we don't know what the body's going to do. We don't know if there's going to be pain. But my mom was not afraid of death. She had made the decision. She was ready to walk into the presence of the Lord. And I just got to say, my mom was always a tough lady, always a strong woman. I mean, she was a strong lady. But to watch her never complain, she literally never complained in 6 months. But when she died, she was so brave. And that was just, my entire family was humbled. They're like, "Wow, we hope when our time comes, we're brave like she was." And it's just powerful, man. When you watch someone walk confidently into the presence of God, it's an amazing thing.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and on that happy note, now we got to do the podcast.
You're uncomfortable now. See, this is one of those times where I talk and people this is a really bad time to throw the ball to me.
Well, yeah. People don't understand our sense of humor. You and I have said before that we have the right amount of respect and disrespect for each other, and that's part of the reason why we work so well. You mean
you respect me very much and I disrespect you very highly? Is that what we're talking about?
I'm saying it is the right amount. So so here's the thing. We had, for those of you who have listened to the podcast regularly, we got this thing called the Bible Inner Circle. And this last week, I did a training out here in Southern California. And so we had a bunch of guys fly in from literally all over the country to go through this. And they reminded me. So Wednesday night, I had everyone over my house for pizza, just to hang out and stuff. And it's really cool, right? Because we've all talked to each other, pretty much all of us, have talked to each other in our Voxer group. And, I mean, the Voxer group's amazing, absolutely amazing. Just go back and listen to some of our past episodes where we actually play clips from the Voxer group. It's an amazing group of men and women. And so anyway, I'm sitting there with all these guys. I'm like, "Oh, man, I forgot to text Peyton." So I sent this text to you, and you were laughing your head off when you got my text because of the way you responded in the text. But this is what I mean by the right amount of respect and disrespect. So people got to understand, when you and I went to Exponential a few years back, it's where we met the guy formerly known as White Tyrone. You know where I'm going now, right?
I remember now.
We had this helium-filled dolphin, and we slapped a Church Planter magazine label on it, and we're floating it around the exhibit hall, because you like rent a space. You get this little space. And I'm like, dude, we're floating a dolphin. And we joked about wanting to do it like when Rick Warren was on stage at the West Coast Exponential, just like have the dolphin start going across and, you know, watch them try to figure out who's got the remote control. And so I text you. I'm like, hey man, do you need me to send you the other helium dolphin for your mom's funeral? Because I could just so see you and your brother like floating the dolphin around your mom's funeral. Because it wasn't even a funeral, it was a party.
Time.
She wanted a party.
It was a party.
Or send off.
Yeah. Yeah, I was laughing because it was, I showed it to my brother and he goes, oh, he gets it, man. He gets it. Because there were people like going, wait, what? We're not going to have a church service? I'm
right.
like, no. My mom, she said this years ago. I remember her looking at me one time. This is years ago, before she was even sick. And she said, hey, if I ever die, she goes, and she said this over the years since and recently. She went over with my brother even just a couple months ago what she wanted. But she's like, I don't want a funeral. She's like, I know the Lord. And when my time comes, I'm not going to a bad place. She's like, I'm going to be with him. So she goes, so I will not allow anyone to cry for me. I will not allow anyone to be sad or mourn. No one wears black. She goes, I want a party, and I want you to throw an amazing party. And she goes, I want people to know that this is heaven, man. Like, I've gone home. So we did. We totally bypassed the church deal. And we threw just an awesome, I want to say raging, that sounded wrong. We
had a kegger for Mom. I love you, Mom.
No, it was great though. Like cause she was crazy, man. Like my mom she came from she was a daughter of a highly decorated colonel in the Army, and very well respected, well-known guy. And she you know, but she kind of rebelled against all of the social constraints. And so she wasn't a wild child, but she had a lot of fun in her. So when she would go to pick up her family, they were all very prim and proper, straight-laced. And she would wear the most outlandish stuff. And this is back in the day where you could go up to the gate and meet people when they got off the airplane. And my mom, like back in the 80s, would be wearing like hot pink, glittery fluorescent spandex pants. Like she would just wear and she'd be laughing her butt off the whole time, you know, when she was doing it. And she was just funny, man. And she would just embarrass people, you know, just on purpose, because she just had fun. And so we threw a party, man, and it was pretty cool. All these bikers turned up.
Nice.
Yeah, dude, we had all these bikers. It was pretty rad. And then we had a couple gay guys come in dressed like fairies. That was kind of funny. Because my mom, like, you got to understand about her, too. Like, she loved everybody. My mom was like Jesus. Like, nobody was on the outs with her. She just embraced every single person she came across. Like, I was looking through photo albums, and they used to call our house growing up, the nickname was Linda's Home for Wayward Boys, because when all the people in like my school got, you know, kicked out of their house, I'd tell them, hey, so-and-so got kicked out of it. My mom go, tell them they can come live here. So it's funny, man. I was just looking through the photo albums, you know, and it was like whenever anyone was down and out, Thanksgiving was filled with like immigrants, like people from Mexico, Vietnam, and she'd be like, hey, that guy is a janitor at my school, but he was a doctor in his country, and he had to flee the North Vietnamese, you know, and he's a janitor here. And, you know, I learned a lot about life from her. But anyways, we're super digressing off church planning, the podcast, which, by the way, guys, if you're new to the podcast, we do talk church planning.
We haven't even told them what today's topic is.
I know. It's usually about 30 minutes in, because we do this. And, of course, I've been away for weeks, and so, you know, it's kind of cool, but bear with us. It's kind of cool to honor my mom like this for a couple minutes, because she was a great lady.
Yeah, what are we talking about in today's podcast?
We did say that we were going to talk about, it was, you put me on the spot there, but
I don't know how to label it. I know what the general idea was, because I remember our conversation was on...
well, tell the story, and then we'll announce the topic.
You don't remember the story. That's what you're saying.
I don't. Dude, my brain, so my brain is not good. We talked about this. We're actually doing the podcast like hours later because I totally blew past our time. Like, my brain's not been here or there. Like, I've almost run like a number of red lights.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's totally understandable.
Yeah. But my brain's not here all the way.
Here's the thing, guys. All right. So let me give you the setup, the proper setup. We got this thing called the Bible Inner Circle. This is, without a doubt, for me, the most enjoyable thing that I do out of all of the stuff that I do. For those of you that have listened to the podcast for a while, I mean, you guys have heard I'm a marketer. I do a lot of marketing stuff. I make a pretty good living doing all that stuff. And I would give up all of it for this Bible Inner Circle because that's how cool the Bible Inner Circle is. And so I do marketing for it. So here's basically the gist of it. The Bible Inner Circle, it's a community of bivocational pastors and church planners, and basically I would say it's actually everybody in ministry. I mean, I've had some people come to me and they're like, hey, well, I'm not actively planting a church. I don't have a congregation right now. Like, we've got one guy who I can think of off the top of my head. I go, we've got people in the group who are what I would call licking their wounds, right? For those of you who are church planners actively or have been, you know what that term means, licking your wounds. Like, you just went through a battle and you're like, okay, I got to regroup. And so we've got some people who are, fresh out of a church plant. We've got other people who are, hey, we think God's calling us to this, and, this is kind of new to us, and so they're in it. But the key is everyone is in ministry, and they take ministry as the number one thing in their life. And along those lines, they've got to figure out a way to make a living. And so in the Bible Inner Circle, we've got a couple of things going on. Hold on a second here. Bye-bye, baby girl. Okay, have fun. Yeah, baby girl. You going to go get Lukey? Lukey too? Okay. Bye.
So you immediately just became likable to our female audience. That just happened.
And here I was going to cut that out. No, apparently I got to leave that in there.
Family men now take you seriously. You now appear more spiritual suddenly.
I know. I'm the great father. My child tells me if they're going to Disneyland because I hate Disneyland so much, you can't pay me to go there.
Bye, Dad. We're going to Disneyland without you to create memories without you.
And to which I would say, go. Be well, my child.
Here's $20.
Make sure you don't come back till midnight. No. So,
that likability thing? We just completely ended it. But go on.
No, I can't cut that section out. All right, just wanted to make sure. So anyway, we got the Bible Inner Circle. And what we do for this, for those of you who haven't actually seen it, we've got a number of things. One is we send out a print newsletter every month. The newsletter, like we just finished July's, which is about ready to get mailed probably first part of next week, or right after the holiday. And I think it's like 35 pages, right? So I'm not talking about some little small newsletter. Like, these are meaty newsletters where we dive into ministry topics, and that's what you handle, Peyton. And then I talk about the money-making side. Like, how do you, not money-making with church, so that'd be really cool. Hey, here's how to get everyone in your church to tithe today. No, but like,
let me interject something real quick, because we were talking about this today. It was really ingenious about the Bible Inner Circle is because some guys that hear that and go like, whoa, wait a second, teach how to make money. That's the devil, right? You got an email, and we were laughing at it today. But that's what Paul did. That's actually what Paul did, is he trained his church planners how to be tent makers. And then when he sent them out, they had a business. So Titus and Timothy and all these guys, they didn't just go to places and mooch. I mean, they were pioneers. So they had to go to places with a trade. And so what Paul did, and scholars will tell you this, is he reproduced not only the church planner within him, which I can help with, and this is why we tag team this, but Pete can also reproduce himself as a social media consultant or even a business consultant, business growth consultant. These are the ways that Pete makes, you say, a decent living. You make a really good living. And so you're able to help these guys out. And so we were talking about this. This is actually more first century than people realize. And yet certain guys will get emails and be like, that's just wrong.
So we actually we're creating a new section of the podcast where I'm going to share with you the best comments. And when I say best, I mean like the rudest comments I've gotten from pastors, either via text or email, because I get them like crazy, man. It's like, you got to understand, and this to me is kind of the ironic thing. I work in a lot of different niches. I work with a lot of real estate agents. I work with a lot of car detailers. And without a doubt, hands down, the rudest people to me are pastors. Like it is like, I mean, we've joked about on the podcast before. There was some guy from Alaska who like went off on me like months or maybe even a year ago. I don't remember what it was. And so like Tyrone remembers it because all last week he's like, oh, just pay, I'm the guy from Alaska or something like that. It's just, apparently the whole state of Alaska is now,
just know if you write these letters, we will make fun of you.
We will make fun of you.
You will become a laughing stock in our Bible Inner Circle.
I got to tell everyone, like, what we give them, because I think it's, like, the coolest thing. So when we give them this newsletter, it's, like, actionable ideas on making money, being self-employed, and ministry tools, right? So we've got that newsletter. Then we do 2 live teleconferences a month. These are mastermind calls. So everyone calls in, and everyone gets to ask their questions. It doesn't matter if it's ministry-related or if it's business-related. If it's ministry-related, Peyton steps up and answers the question. Business related, I step up and answer the question. And then even guys are able to like chime in and help each other and be like, hey, I ran into that situation and here's what I did. So it's truly a mastermind. It's really, really awesome. I love those things. But the thing that has taken off, and when I originally started it, it was almost like an afterthought. I didn't realize it was going to be the linchpin of the whole thing. And that is, we've got this thing called the Voxer Group. So Voxer is an app on your iPhone, your Android, I think even Windows. It's on a desktop computer. And what it allows you to do is we've got a private group. It's just all of us, who are in the Bible Inner Circle in there, but we can push the talk. You can leave a voicemail, think of it like that, and everyone gets to hear it in real time, and everyone gets to respond to it. So some of those podcasts that we did in the past where like Ed asked, why are you bivocational? And everyone chimed in. That was all from the Voxer app. Or I think the last episode we played that we aired, I had to basically come up with one because you were gone, dealing with everything with your family. That was like all the successes that guys, and that wasn't all the successes, it was a bunch of successes that guys had when I put that string together. And so that Voxer group has taken on a life of its own. Like just this week, we had a guy like going, hey guys, there's, as we've said, there's not many other people I can go to with my problems.
Yeah.
Like you guys understand, you're pastors. I usually can't even go to my own staff because, that might be who the problem is, right? And he was like burying his heart, and you just got to hear, everyone else just pouring into the guy going, hey, I'm going through the same thing you're going through. In fact, I don't know if you heard
and guys are breaking down I listened to that one today. And,
I wouldn't tell them they're breaking down because that would actually keep me from joining the 5-0. Yeah, a bunch of guys crying. What's you talking about? I ain't joining that.
Pete's like, I'm uncomfortable now. Emotion. I don't like this.
Yeah. So like that guy who you commented back, you did that longer message. I don't know if you heard it, but he chimed in this morning and he was like, hey guys, I want you to know how encouraging it was to hear that. He goes, I played those messages for my wife, and we were both just kind of encouraged by what you guys had to say, and also just kind of in awe at how many people have gone through the same thing that we're going through. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just feels good to know you're not the only one going through that stuff. So anyway, the Voxer group's taken on a life of its own, but here's so that's the setup for this, right? So I'm a marketer, right? That's what I do. Like I market stuff, and my goal is to get people into the Bible Inner Circle that it would be right for. And that's kind of the key. Right. I don't want anybody. I only want the right people. And so one of the things that I remind people is great marketing repels as much as it attracts. And when it repels, like, you know, the guy from Alaska last year who got repelled at, you know, some of my stuff, it's okay. Because if a guy like that were to come into the Bible Inner Circle, it would be like dropping an atom bomb in there. He'd ruin the whole thing. He'd ruin the camaraderie. He'd ruin the connection that people are making, the community that they're able to make with each other.
Right.
So you got to understand, I mean, yes, I do market this stuff to bring people in. However, I want the right people in it, and the wrong people, I want them to get out. I want them to get out. Like if they do squeak in, I want them out in the first month. I want them to wash out and just be like, you know, this isn't for me. And because they're going to ruin that community. They're going to totally ruin the community. So one of the things that we're doing right now is I got this thing called, you know, how to become a social media consultant. It's a great way to earn money. In fact, one of our guys in there, his name is Josh. I actually can't remember where he's from, but, so, you know, one of the things I ask when everyone joins is tell me what your goals are. Let me know what your goals are so, you know, I can help you along this. And his goal is, look, I got a $500 a month deficiency. And this is in May, right? So it's a little over a month ago he joined. And like 2 weeks ago, he boxes me and he goes, I told you I had a $500 a month deficiency. I now have $1,800 a month coming in. So that more than meets my deficiency. I'm now ahead of the game. And he's just in the beginning stages, right? I mean, he's just getting going. And, so I mean, I get these emails from people because I offer everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but I have offered the social media consulting course, which is a course I teach for $2,000. I go, I'll give this to you for free as a blatant bribe to get you to try the Bible Inner Circle, which is $197 a month. So some people get like so bent out of shape because I told them it was free and I told them it was a blatant bribe to get them to try the Bible Inner Circle. And they're like, but then it's not free. I got to pay the $197. I go, no, actually, you could pay the $2,000 by itself and not join the Bible Inner Circle, or you could join the Bible Inner Circle and not get the program for free if you don't want it. But if you want it for free, you got to join the Bible Inner Circle. I mean, that's my, and I go, it's why I say in the video, it is a blatant bribe. Here's why I'm doing it. I want to keep, I put this in the video, I'm trying to keep the freebie-seeking knuckleheads out. So I will give it to you free, but you got to try it, right? Because I want, and I know the right people, once they get in, they're going to get hooked because of the community that we create and being able to help each other. So just so you know, guys, if you're one of those people who've left a rather scathing review, either texted it to me or emailed it to me. They're totally not like me.
Our listenership is not.
Our listeners are going to start texting me now and going, I want to engage on the podcast. You said but we'll be bringing you up on the podcast going forward because some of them are just classic. So here's what started the conversation with you and I earlier this week. This one guy was actually very respectful. I actually really respected the way that he brought up his issues with how I market. And even though I disagree with him, I respect it because he was very polite. And that was the unusual thing because most of the pastors are just total jerks. like the guy we were talking about this morning who like ends up writing in this long email to me of, you know, how I'm basically the devil, right? And I was joking with you. And all my response to him was like 2 lines. I go, you didn't even watch the video. I think that says more about you than it does me. It was just like, you feel compelled to like have some authority to tell me how I'm doing everything wrong, and you didn't even bother to watch it. And it's like, I know you didn't bother to watch it because of your original question that started the whole conversation. But anyway, so this guy was really respectful, and he basically says this. He goes, hey, you know what? You might want to rethink your marketing strategy because you email people a lot. And I think it might go over better if you don't email us so much. So he's totally respectful in that. And anybody who's been through the funnel, they'll totally agree. I email you to death, right?
Yeah.
And I text you.
I'm always in the funnel, so I get them all.
Yeah, right? And He's 100% accurate. I email a lot. But here's my reply to him. My reply was, I go, hey, man, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Because I truly did. Like, I felt he was being one of the nice guys and just giving me his opinion. I'm like, but frankly, I do it because it works. I'm like, that's kind of the catch right there. And I go, but here's the thing. It's kind of like sharing the gospel. You don't share the gospel with someone one time and then, if they decide it's not for them or they don't respond right away, you walk away. You would continue to follow up with them because you want them to make a decision that's in their best interest. It's the same way with me. I want people to make a decision that's in their best interest, but it's my responsibility to follow up with them. It's not their responsibility to follow up with me, right? It's not someone else's responsibility to go, hey, you know what, Pete, remember like a year ago you were talking to me about Jesus? Okay, I think I'm ready to listen. Now, does that happen? Of course it does. But it's not, you can't rely on them. It's your responsibility to do the follow-up. So that's what I do. And I go, and I don't think I said this in the email. I think I just left it at that because that was truly, it. I'm like, dude, it works. But I am, and this is the part that you and I were talking about. And you're like, hey, we got to talk about this on the podcast. I am 100% not concerned at all with the people who don't want to buy what I got. Like, I don't care if the non-buyer is offended. I don't care if somebody is like, oh, you're emailing me too much. I wasn't going to buy anyway. I 100% don't care because that's not the person I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to reach who this is going to be right for. And so it's my responsibility to continue that follow-up. And that's why I tell people all the time, I don't care when people unsubscribe. I'm like, dude, unsubscribe from the list, right? If you're not going to buy, why do I want you on my list? Because all these marketers, they get bent out of shape. Oh, I got so many people who unsubscribed. And I'm like, so what? So what if they're off your list? They weren't going to buy. It's kind of like, and I was telling you this too, and I'll get off my soapbox here in a minute. I kind of feel like I rolled the reverse. I'm talking all right now. But when I was in high school, this is really pre-email days. For all you millennials, yes, there was a world without email once upon a time. And you'd go visit a church, and you'd fill out a form, and you would be on their mail list and forever. Like, you could not get off. And the reason why that annoyed me is because there was no way to unsubscribe, right? I couldn't go, look, I'm not your ideal guy. I'm never coming back to your church. I was just visiting. Why are you still mailing me? But nowadays we have that. And if they say, take me off your list, take them off the list. Unsubscribe them. They're not the right person for whatever you've got, right? Your product, your service, even your church. If they want to unsubscribe from your church email, dude, unsubscribe. We'll get you another way. But I don't know. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Well, and it comes back to a principle, something they said earlier, and I almost jumped in then. Our topic today is attractional versus repellent ministry. Oh. And so here's the deal. When we were talking, I got excited because I go, Pete, we got to talk about, like, this is a principle that doesn't just apply to marketing. It applies to ministry in general, because what we're noticing today is, since the attractional movement, which, by the way, I'm not anti-attractional. I don't have the problem that other people do, because I think Lloyd Jones used to always talk about the pendulum swing, that the pendulum swings far one way and then everybody reacts and they go to the opposite side and they swing too far the other way. Missional and attractional is what we hear talked about in the conversation. No, I'm missional. No, I'm attractional. And it's kind of like a Bud Light commercial. It tastes great. No, it's less filling, and everybody's really talking about the same thing. They're talking about, how do you reach people? And the New Testament knows them both. It knows attractional, aka Pentecost, right? That was attractional ministry. But it also knows missional ministry, which is other parts. And so temple courts and house to house, you have missional and attractional, and that's okay. They're both there. But what people don't talk about is they don't talk about the repellent we can talk about attractional. What about when you don't want everybody? And that's what Pete was saying is Bible Inner Circle. You don't want these yuckleheads that are really judgmental. Like we had an email today where the guy goes, hey, I don't want to pick a fight, but he sent an email and you forwarded it to me because we laughed. And he basically was like, hey, man.
That's right, Pastor. We laugh at you.
Well, but we do. We laugh because, his stuff, he's like, and in Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no. Well, that's not what he was talking. He wasn't talking about somebody saying, hey, I have something for free. And yes, you get it. Anyways, and I said, well, I guess, he hasn't, because he said, well, I've been preaching to the Sermon on the Mount, it's made him sensitive. And like you said, had he listened to your whole thing, he would have understood what you're saying. And I said, I guess he hasn't preached as far as judge not. Well, the last thing we want is guys that come in and they're just super judgmental and they're making life hell for it. Right now, there's a brotherhood and a camaraderie, and guys can speak into each other's lives, but they're doing it as brothers and friends. They're not angry at everybody about everything. And I think that like you said, like with a church planting core team, this is where I've seen it often, is where often on church planting core teams, church planners want people, they want the numbers because they want to legitimize their church plant by having success. And whether we know it or like it, we often equate success with numbers. So it's legit if I can fill a room with people and see that, God blessed me. Well, there's lots of full churches that maybe God isn't blessing, and they've attracted tons of people, but they have size, but they don't have depth. There's not that relationship. There's not it. I've been in big churches where I think, man, I wouldn't want anyone to come to this thing, because when they really get to know us, we're eating our own, or you know what I'm saying? Like there's no real fellowship. There's no warmth. There's no aspect of Acts 2:42. And so when it came to building a core team, what I would often do, you say good marketing repels as well as attracts. I would send out cards that would offend religious people like crazy, but really appeal to unchurched people. And I remember getting angry phone calls from pastors. What are you saying in this? Blah, blah, blah. And I would say something like, church sucks. We all know it's true. And you can't, other churches are, hey, what are you saying, Mike? I'm not saying your church sucks. I'm saying that the non-believers in your town or in these communities, this is in Wales, I'm like, have they come to your church? No. Why? Because I think your church sucks. And you know what? I'm just calling it what it is. They have
you're like, I'm not saying your church sucks, but if the
but they are.
But they are.
But they are. And I'm trying to reach them. So I'm just going to come out and say it. They think church sucks. And so we're doing something completely different that doesn't suck for non-believers. Your church is awesome for Christians. And I'm not trying to get Christians. In fact, I made a deal with all of the pastors in the area. If your members come to my church plant, I will tell them, no, you can't come here. And that's radical, right? Like nobody, and they would kind of go, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, man, I don't want your Christians, honestly. And
that's really radical even among church planners, because I can tell you of a lot of church planners who would love it if people came to their church because they need the numbers. They need the tithe, honestly, is what they're looking for. And I'm not saying all church planners, I'm saying that's radical even among church planners.
Yeah, and it was radical at the time.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. We talked about this. Like, it even goes deeper. This whole principle you're talking about, repellent ministry. I had spent, remember now, we'll go back in time. I had spent 3 years on staff at Lloyd Jones's. They wanted to vote me in as the pastor, and I laid down a list because I watched him just fry the guy that I served under, and I thought, he was way more patient than me. Like, there's no way I'll survive. And that now I loved that church and I loved those people. They were amazing. But the only reason they tolerated me, and they loved me to death, don't get me wrong, but it was because I could preach. And they loved my preaching. But my ways were, I remember one guy telling me, hey, you keep preaching like that, you do whatever you want as far as I'm concerned. because I was their evangelist, and I was starting to get radical. And I remember thinking, I'm going to break this church. If I end up being the guy, I'm going to be the guy that splits this church. And I don't want to be that guy. So I laid down 10 things, and I said, look, guys, we know. And we ended up planting off anyways. I helped another guy plant off and was a part of that. But the reality was, I was kind of like, look, anyways, all that to say, they rejected my proposal, and this and that. And it was kind of like, if we're going to work together, these 10 things. Now, in one sense, I was repelling a legacy church, like a historic church. You know how cool it would be on my resume to have just walked into that and have, hey, Peyton Jones, former pastor of, right now I can only say evangelist, but that would have been really cool, but I was repellent even back then. Jesus, in fact, was repellent of crowds. Interesting. I was reading Chuck Swindoll, who, I know you guys all think he's like an old fuddy-duddy dude from the 80s, master communicator. I one of the most masterful preachers of our century. And Swindoll was talking about how Jesus had the temptation. And at the temptation, I had never made this connection before, that, Jesus was like, he's hungry, he's fasting, and Satan comes to him and says, hey, if you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. And Swindoll starts going on about it, that all this was about Satan telling him, hey, if you do these things, people follow you. If you're able to throw yourself off the temple, people follow you. Make a big show. Hey, who wouldn't follow someone who could just mass produce bread for hungry people? And that's why when Jesus is, he does the miracle, the 5,000, the next day, he gets in the boat and he takes off. The next day, they run around the Sea of Galilee. Like, that is radical. They run around to see him on the other side. Like, they're ready to follow him because he gave them bread. And he says, you're following me because I gave you bread. And then he repels them. And he says, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And he repels them. And that is radical. When you start standing like that, where no one can buy you and you're not owned by having crowds and following, for example, like, I think a lot of guys, they start off wanting to church plant and become serial church planters. Then their church grows and they're like, well, I can't leave it now because it's my paycheck, and which is another reason to teach guys to do Bible, and because Paul would move on, Wesley would move on. He trained his guys to live as circuit riders, but Jesus had this repellent bone in his body, and one of the things I'd never seen before was Jesus at that moment. I think it came back. This is what Swindoll brings up. Swindoll brings up that at that moment for Jesus, it was a temptation like what Satan offered him, turn these stones to bread, anyone will follow you. And Jesus just goes, you know what? You guys are following me for the wrong reason. And he repels them. And the disciples are like, Lord, this is hard. It's a hard saying. We don't know what to do. Like, this is difficult, Lord. And Jesus is like, well, are you going to leave as well? He is willing to let the apostles walk out on him. And I think for a church planter, you have to have, and in ministry, you have to have that ability to do the right thing. And in this age of Twitter and Facebook likes and like me and look at me and follow me, I think we're in big danger of this. I think that we still need people and leaders and church planners who are going to stand up and be prophetic, and they're going to let God speak through them. And they're not gonna, and this is why I went back to Lloyd Jones, because I'll be honest, I was playing to the crowds when I was Lloyd, the evangelist that Lloyd Jones is. I was the golden boy, man. Like, no sooner was I the evangelist at Lloyd Jones. A couple of years in, I was making the rounds on the circuit, and then I got invited to be a part of the evangelical movement, which is kind of the movers and shakers in the evangelical world. I got asked to be a part of the executive committee. Then I became a part of the board of it, the admin board. And then I got asked to be an editor for the evangelical magazine. Like, it was all, it was all there, man. It was all like, that was like the path to greatness, man. It was like, started getting asked to speak at the conferences and take part in it. And all of a sudden it was like, that church I went to that kicked me in the teeth, I quit everything. And what happened is I never defended myself after that happened. I won the vote. I called in a respected moderator who had my back, but they just trashed me, and I just let it go on because I was like, I'm done with ministry. If this is what it means, I'm out, right? But something really cool happened, and that is, as soon as my reputation was destroyed, I didn't care what people thought about me anymore.
Mm.
And once that happened, I didn't care about repelling Christians or having people think less of me. That's when I was freed up finally to do what God wanted me to do. And it was kind of like after that moment, man, I didn't look back anymore. I never worried about Christians anymore. I wasn't there to please Christians. I wasn't there to, I think I mentioned on another podcast the day where the guy goes, you did this. It was like we would have people come visit and they get mad at the wrong things, and I tell them, hey, don't you come here and teach these new converts to get mad, because they don't know what to get mad at unless a Christian teaches them. And you can teach them to get mad at the wrong stuff. They need to get mad at the right stuff. And that's just, you're all focused on this legalistic crap, or you're focused on, I remember one guy saying, he was basically like, hey, that overhead, you had the guy from Jesus of Nazareth. I had nothing to do with it. But he's like, that guy was an alcoholic and a sinful man. And, he came and talked to me after service. And I was just looking at him thinking, you're the wrong kind of guy to be in this church plan. I didn't even notice what was on the overhead. I wasn't even worried about the overhead, man. I was worried about the suicidal guy over here, and I was worried about the person that
he's looking at the actor. Like,
yeah.
The actor is representing Jesus, but let me tell you about that actor. He's this, he's that. It's like, dude, seriously?
Yeah. And I just remember saying to him, and it was funny because, at that time I didn't have really any radical views on women. I mean, I'm all about team leadership. And so once you go team leadership, there's like, you have women, like I have women pastors on my team because they pastor women, and so, but at the time I wasn't really thinking anything, but I literally just said the most scary thing I could to a guy like him. And I said, oh, you think that's something? I go, you should hear my views on women. I just threw that out there to get rid of him. And no kidding, like I had a leadership meeting. I was like literally searching for, how can I get rid of this guy fast? And that's what came to mind. And so, it was funny because no sooner did I do that, like that afternoon, we were having a leadership meeting at my house. He literally dropped an envelope with his resignation letter. He'd only been with us a couple of weeks, and I told him, really, I don't think this is a church for you, I think you should go to another church down the road. I'd always tell people that.
We interviewed someone, and I don't remember who it was, and he said that it was his first, meeting really with the church that he'd just been hired at. And so this guy comes up to him afterwards. He's a cop, and he goes, yeah, I've been watching you this whole time, and I don't think I like you, and I'm not going to come here again. It's like, that's what he said to the pastor the very first meeting. So I remember my comment to him was, I go, so what'd you say to him? Or because I think his follow-up line to that was, I don't like you, and I don't think I'm going to come here again. And so yeah, that's what it was. And so my response to him was, I go, so did you say to him, don't give it a second thought? I know I won't. Just like, came back, and he's like, no, I couldn't think of it in the moment. I couldn't believe someone would actually come up and say that to me. But that's what you're talking about, is that dude who would like actually come up to you and say, oh, I don't think you're doing ministry right. As you would say, I like, who was it that you were quoting? I like the way I'm doing it better than the way
Moody.
You're not doing it. Yeah, Moody.
Yeah, Moody. Someone said to Moody, and I get this all the time on Facebook. I'll have someone like, I just had an article come out in Outreach, and someone was posting about it on Facebook, and of course they tagged me, And then somebody like made a comment, yes, but we give them coffee cake, and like he was ripping on me. And it's funny because he didn't know I was tagged there. And I didn't respond to it because, you know, you got to be kind of insecure to make a big deal about it. I didn't care. But the reality is that, you know, he made this response. And it's funny because Moody had something similar, because my thought when I read those, I always think, but I bet you I see more converts. And it's not me being like, it's just, I know I lived there at one time. I judged everybody. But once it became about reaching lost people, that stuff didn't matter anymore. I was like, yeah, I remember being so, but I had a lot fewer converts when I was always angry about, you didn't do this right. And someone came to Moody and said, I don't like the way you do evangelism. And Moody said, oh, how do you do it? And he goes, well, I don't. Or is it how you lead converts to Jesus? And he goes, well, how do you do it? And the guy goes, I don't. And I said, and he goes, well, I like the way I do it better than the way you don't.
Right. I love it.
And there's so many instances. Yeah, there's so many instances of people coming up and being super rude. Wesley had a guy walking towards him in the street once, and they were both on the sidewalk. And the guy stopped, and he wasn't going to move and make way for Wesley. And he stopped and he said, I never make way for fools. And Wesley stepped off the curb and into the street and said, I always do. And walked around him.
See, I always wish I was that quick. You know, I'm not that quick. I'm the guy who's like 5 minutes later, I'm going to be stewing on it. I'm like, this is what I should have said. But I love it when I hear guys who are that quick.
That's it, man. But church planners, you have to have the ability to you know, it's kind of like you and I were talking the other day, that so many times in church planning, I've had to make a decision where I know I'm going to lose people. The question is, who do I want to leave? If you're pandering to Christians, then you're always going to be jumping through hoops. And because Christians are into so many weird, wacky things, one day you'd be like feeling like you got to talk about Israel in the right way. Then another day you're going to feel like you got to talk about conspiracy theories, and, you know, because they're reading Left Behind and thinking, you know, the Antichrist is some blonde-haired guy in Russia. Like, you know, I went through all this stuff in the 90s, and at a certain point you just go, everybody just go home. Like, seriously, like, none of that stuff matters, and we're not pandering to you. Once you do that and you just go like Paul, where he goes, I care very little if I'm judged by you or any other human authority, for the Lord alone judges. And then he just says, we will all give an account to him. I will give an account to him. He judges my motives and thoughts. Just have your eye on Jesus. Have your eye on the one person that matters. You know what Jesus has his eye on? The lost people in your church plant. Otherwise, he wouldn't have called you to plant a church. I guarantee you, Jesus did not call you to plant your church to reach Christians. He didn't. You know, what he did is he called you to plant a church to reach lost people that will change the Christians with you on the way, if you've got the guts to not pander to them. And so you, in one sense, you don't really grow up in ministry until it's kind of like a coming of age. You come of age as a minister when you suddenly go, I have one person to please, and he was crucified and resurrected, and you don't fit that criteria. So it's kind of like that T-shirt, you know, I can only please one person today, and he's God. Tomorrow's not looking great for you either, you know? And so that's really what it is, man. And once you do that, you know, that's why when you were, I felt like Epstein on Welcome Back, Carter, when you were talking about this. Remember that old show? No, you don't.
I never watched it. I know what it was, but I never watched it.
Well, there's a character there named Horshack, and every time somebody he would know the answer, he'd go, oh, and he'd like go nuts and put his hand up in the air and, you know, start bouncing his desk around. And that's how I felt when you started talking about this, because I'm like, that is a secret. And for your core team, guys, seriously, for your core team, you have to let people know right up front on your core team, like, hey, I don't think you're, and you can let them travel with you for a little bit, but at a certain point, you guys say, hey, I hear you talking about how we're going to be this big thing. We're going to have all these ministries from day one. And I don't think you know what church planning is, and this might not, because I would have people come to me, and it's like, we were like 5, 6 people when we first started meeting in my living room. And some of our earliest additions, who ended up being incredible, were like, hey, when are we getting a youth group going? And we're like, yeah, that's kind of not really our focus right now. We're probably not going to have a youth group for a number of years. And when we did start a youth group, it was an outreach, and we used that outreach to grab all unsaved kids that were troubled kids. I've told some of the stories in reachingthenreached.book.com.
Oh, love the plug. Love the plug.
Like that, I've been artfully plugging on Facebook recently. I did one the other day where I mentioned, they go, what podcast? And I scrolled through, no one mentioned ours. So I go, hey, have any of you guys heard of the Church Planter podcast? And one of our listeners chimes in and goes, oh, shameless plug. And I go, yeah. And I said, yeah, wasn't that good? Cha-ching. And he goes, I thought cha-ching was for Church Zero. And I said, nope, it applies to any shameless plug, like this one for reachingtheunreachedbook.com. Cha-ching. Someone plugs it up.
I love it.
Artfully done. So, anyways. So, today's topic was attractional versus repellent ministry.
I think I might name this like 3 easy steps to lose everyone in your church. Dude, we've had some crazy. I haven't even shared most of the emails that I get with you, the hate emails. I did share one with you because we both really respect the guy, and I just happen to have I just disagreed with him. And but I used to respect him more. I actually don't respect him as much, because when I called him out on a couple of things, he just was like still upset. But but we both like really respected that guy, and I don't care if people have a difference of opinion with me. I mean, just don't be rude about it. Like, that's my whole thing. You don't need to be a jerk about like
that's it,
your opinion or whatnot. Because the problem with me is, and I know this is a problem, when someone starts throwing down like that to me, I know the whole turn the other cheek thing, but it is not the first thought that comes through my head. The first thought that comes through my head is, oh yeah, you want a piece of me? You want a piece of me?
Yeah, but I've been proud of you in watching how you handle these. I actually,
like I said, I know you most of them. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, anyways, but hey, man. So, Pete, what if you're doing this attractional versus repellent? You spend all your time repelling people from coming to your church plant. That's busy work. You really don't have time to do the accounting for the 2 people in your church that tithe. What should you do about that?
Did you say for the 2 people who in your church that tithe?
Yeah, if you're repelling everybody, then that's busy work, man.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, Peyton, because actually what I would do in that situation is I would let SimplifyChurch.com attract all of that work over to them and let them handle all of my payroll, my bookkeeping, my taxes, keeping me out of jail, keeping me out of trouble with the IRS, keeping me compliant. That's what I'd have SimplifyChurch.com do. How about you, Peyton?
Well, the good news is, Pete, because no church is too big or too small for them, that 2 people isn't a problem. They'll do all your bookkeeping needs, and they'll give you personalized service. And one thing, funny enough, I just did an interview with Josh over at Simplify for something he was doing. He asked me to interview him. I forgot that he's a pastor and a church planner. Like, that's his background. So he actually knows all that stuff. And, when I heard that, I remembered that's why I signed up with you years ago, because I was like, this dude gets it, man. So anyway, Simplify Church, they rock.
They do. They do. Well, hey, guys, thanks so much for listening in and listening to my private rant and what excites me most.
And the principles that we were able to pull out of it.
Yeah, and the principles that we were able to allude to, so I could actually talk about it on a podcast. Why don't you sign us out, Peyton?
All right. Well, hey, guys, don't forget to pick up your copy of Reaching the Unreached. It's my new book. And that book also has a small group study guide within it. Be sure to check that out. You can order it by the case at discount by going to reachingtheunreachedbook.com. And also today's podcast is brought to you by the BivoInnerCircle.com. If you guys want to go ahead and sign up and get involved with this deal that we're doing right now, we want to help coach and train you in first century style church planting and give you the freedom, flexibility, and mobility to plant anywhere, anytime, and actually take care of your family while you do it. So go on over to BivoInnerCircle.com and check that out. And this has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell reminding you, if you want to reach the ones nobody's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.